What if I told you there's a game that defined an era? Not just for Sega, not just for Sonic, but for gaming as a whole. A game so ambitious it had to be split into two parts because it couldn't fit on a single cartridge. A game surrounded by rumors, controversies, and legends that fans are still unraveling almost 30 years later. That game is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. By the time this game came out in 1994, Sonic was already a household name. The first game introduced him as a speedster who saved woodland creatures from Dr. Robotnik's robotic clutches. The second upped the stakes, introducing his buddy Tails and expanding the scale of what a platformer could be. But Sega wasn't content to rest on their laurels. They wanted Sonic 3 to be their magnum opus, a game that would blow everything else on the Sega Genesis out of the water. And man, they didn't pull any punches. They threw everything at it. An expanded story, seamless cutscenes, new characters, and gameplay mechanics that pushed the Genesis to its limits. It was a game that dared to dream big, and even though it didn't come without sacrifices, what we got is a title that still stands as one of Sonic's most celebrated adventures. But what's really fascinating isn't just how great this game is, it's the stories behind it, the ambitious development, the bold decisions, and the mysteries that have kept fans theorizing for decades. This isn't just a game, it's a legacy, and that's what we're here to explore. Let's dive into what made Sonic the Hedgehog 3 not just a great game, but a defining moment in gaming history. The story behind Sonic the Hedgehog 3 starts with one simple fact. Sega was swinging for the fences. By the early 90s, the Sega Genesis, or the Mega Drive if you're outside of North America, was a genuine contender in the console wars. Sonic was Sega's MVP, and his first two games had cemented his status as a cultural phenomenon. Naturally, the expectations for his next adventure were sky high. But making a Sonic game wasn't as simple as slapping together a few levels and calling it a day. Sega wanted Sonic 3 to be bigger, flashier, and more technically advanced than anything fans had seen before. The problem? The Sega Genesis wasn't exactly cutting-edge technology by 1994. The hardware was already starting to show its age, and pulling off the ambitious vision for Sonic 3 was going to require some serious ingenuity. The project began with Sonic Team, Sega's internal development group based in Japan, but there was a twist this time around. The game's development was also supported by the Sega Technical Institute, or STI, in the United States. STI had been created to fuse Western and Japanese development expertise, and they'd already proven their chops with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. However, this hybrid approach brought its own set of challenges. Language barriers, time zone differences, and creative disagreements meant that the development was anything but smooth. Sonic Team, led by Yuji Naka, was notoriously protective of the characters and wanted tight control over his portrayal. Meanwhile, STI was eager to inject fresh ideas into the project. The result was a game that was incredibly ambitious, but also burdened by internal struggles to bring those ambitions to life. One of the biggest hurdles came down to size. Literally. The original plan for Sonic 3 was massive. The game's levels, story, and mechanics were so big that they couldn't fit it on a single cartridge. Sega faced a tough decision: cut content and scale back the game, or find a workaround. Their solution was unprecedented: split the game into two separate releases. That's how Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles came to be. And then there's the most infamous wrinkle in Sonic 3's development: Michael Jackson. Yes, that Michael Jackson. It's widely believed, and corroborated by many involved in the project, that Michael Jackson was brought on to compose music for the game. Sega, at that time, had a relationship with Jackson through the Moonwalker game, and bringing him on for Sonic 3 meant to add another layer of star power to the project. But this collaboration never saw an official credit. Why? It's complicated. Let's start with the facts. The credits for Sonic 3 list a team of composers, including Brad Buxer, Bobby Brooks, and other notable names. However, over the years, numerous insiders have claimed that Michael Jackson himself was brought on to work on the project. The alleged involvement of Jackson had been supported by multiple pieces of evidence. Brad Buxer, a musician and Jackson collaborator credited on Sonic 3, had openly stated that he worked on the game and that Jackson was involved in crafting some of the music. According to Buxer, Jackson even contributed directly to certain tracks but later distanced himself from the project. The reason? It depends on who you ask. Some sources claim that Jackson was unhappy with how the Sega Genesis sound chip made his music sound. Let's face it, as groundbreaking as the Genesis was, the YM2612 FM synthesizer chip couldn't quite replicate the intricacy of Jackson's style. Others point to the scandals surrounding Jackson at the time, suggesting Sega quietly removed his name from the credits to avoid controversy. Regardless of the reasons, Jackson's involvement was never officially acknowledged. But the story doesn't end with speculation. When Sonic 3 was re-released in various collections over the years, something curious happened. Some of its tracks were replaced. For instance, the music for Carnival Night, Ice Cap, and Launch Base Zones were swapped out in later releases, leading fans to speculate that Sega no longer had the rights to use the original tracks. This only fueled the theory that Jackson's fingerprints were all over the soundtrack, and that legal or contractual issues were behind the changes. But despite all of these challenges and controversies, the developers persevered. What they delivered wasn't just a game, it was a statement. Every decision, every innovation, and every compromise during development shaped Sonic the Hedgehog 3 into the iconic title we know today. It wasn't an easy road, but the ambition and passion behind the project were unmistakable.
We had this great idea for a new game called Sonic and Knuckles. It's Knuckles in his own game.
Sonic the Hedgehog 3 wasn't just a step forward in the series, it was a giant leap. From the moment you hit start, it was clear that this game wasn't interested in being more of the same. Sega didn't just want Sonic to go fast, they wanted him to do more. And they wanted players to feel like they were in a world that was alive, dynamic, and constantly rewarding exploration. One of the first things that blew players' minds? Save files. For the first time in the series, you didn't have to finish the entire game in one sitting. This wasn't just a quality of life improvement, it was a direct acknowledgement of the game's massive scale. With sprawling levels packed with secrets, alternate paths, and collectibles, Sonic 3 wasn't a quick afternoon run. It was an adventure. And speaking of gameplay depth, let's talk about the elemental shields. These weren't just cool looking power-ups, they changed the way you approach each level. Flame Shield let Sonic dash through fire and lava without taking damage. The Bubble Shield gave him the ability to breathe underwater, a godsend for anyone who'd had nightmares about the Labyrinth Zone music. And the Electric Shield offered a double jump and the ability to magnetically attract rings. What's genius here is that each shield wasn't just about survival. They gave players unique ways to interact with the environment and explore areas that would otherwise be inaccessible. Then there's the introduction of Knuckles. Sonic 3 was his debut and Sega nailed his characterization right out of the gate. Knuckles wasn't just some throwaway villain. He was the protector of Angel Island and its prized Master Emerald, duped by Dr. Robotnik into thinking Sonic and Tails were the enemy. In gameplay terms, Knuckles was a powerhouse. Players couldn't control him in Sonic 3 itself, but his presence set the stage for his full playability in Sonic and Knuckles. His strength and climbing ability added even more layers to the level design, and he felt like an equal rival to Sonic in every way. And oh, those levels! The stages in Sonic 3 were a masterclass in design. Sega knew the secret sauce of a great Sonic level, combining breakneck speed with movement and precision platforming, and they cranked it up here. Every zone felt distinct, with its own mechanics that kept things fresh from start to finish. Take Hydrocity Zone, for example. It's one of the best water levels in gaming history, because it never punishes you for slowing down. Instead, it uses water mechanics to enhance Sonic's momentum with currents, slides, and breathtaking set pieces. Then there's the infamous Carnival Night Zone barrel, a moment burned into the memory of every Sonic 3 player. If you know, you know. If you don't, it's a spinning barrel that looks like you need to jump on it repeatedly to pass. But no, the solution was subtle directional inputs, something most players didn't figure out without some serious trial and error. It's a polarizing moment, sure, but it's also a perfect example of how Sonic 3 wasn't afraid to challenge its players. And for the completionists, special stages made their triumphant return, this time with the Blue Sphere minigame. These stages were fast-paced, strategic, and incredibly addictive. Collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds transformed Sonic into Super Sonic, or maybe Super Saiyan Sonic? But Sega didn't stop there. Completing both Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles with all of the emeralds unlocked Hypersonic, a glowing, all-powerful version of the Hedgehog that made you feel unstoppable. What made Sonic 3's gameplay so special is how every piece worked together. The save files encouraged exploration, the shields gave tools to interact with the world, and the levels themselves felt like playgrounds designed to reward curiosity and skill. It wasn't about going fast, it was about mastering a system that felt endlessly rewarding, whether you were blasting through as Sonic or hunting down every last secret. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 wasn't just a technical marvel, it marked a turning point in how Sonic adventures were told. For this, Sonic games had narrative elements, sure, but they were mostly tucked away in manuals or implied through the levels themselves. Sonic 3 changed that by integrating storytelling directly into the gameplay, using seamless in-game cutscenes and environmental storytelling that brings its world to life. The game kicks off with a bang, quite literally. After Sonic and Tails arrive at Angel Island in their trusty biplane, the Tornado, Supersonic's power is stolen in an instant by a mysterious red figure, Knuckles. This isn't some pre-rendered cinematic. It happened in real time, setting the high stakes right away. Suddenly, you're not up against Dr. Robotnik. You're being hunted by this powerful new rival who knows Angel Island like the back of his hand. Knuckles was a game changer for the series. His character wasn't just another minion of Robotnik. He was the guardian of the Master Emerald, a mythic gem that powered Angel Island and kept it floating high above the ocean. Robotnik, ever the schemer, had manipulated Knuckles into believing that Sonic and Tails were coming to steal the Emerald. It was a classic misunderstood enemy trope, but it worked perfectly within the context of the game. Knuckles wasn't evil, he was just doing his job, protecting his homeland from what he thought were invaders. The setup created an immediate tension that carried through the entire game. Knuckles wasn't just a character in the story, he actively sabotaged your progress. He'd trigger traps, destroy bridges, and block your path at the worst possible times. It added a dynamic layer to the gameplay, making him feel like a constant presence rather than just a boss waiting at the end of a level. But it wasn't just Knuckles' rivalry that made the story memorable. Sonic 3 leaned heavily into themes of environmentalism and preservation, ideas that had always been a part of the series but were more pronounced here. Angel Island was a lush, tropical paradise filled with waterfalls, ancient ruins, and vibrant wildlife. Until Robotnik showed up. His mechanical factories and massive death egg brought destruction wherever they appeared, turning the pristine environments into polluted wastelands. Each zone told its own piece of the story. The transition between stages wasn't a simple fade to black. Every ending flowed directly into the next area. After destroying Robotnik's massive launch base, for example, you'd watch as Sonic and Tails pursued the villain into the skies, setting up the events of Sonic and Knuckles. These transitions gave the game a sense of continuity and momentum that was groundbreaking for the time. And let's talk about Robotnik, or Eggman as some of you know him. In Sonic 3, he's more manipulative and cunning than ever. He's not just building robots and waiting till the end of a level, he's actively pulling the strings, tricking Knuckles and using the Master Emerald's power to restore his massive death egg. His boss battles reflected this evolution too. They weren't just about dodging and attacking, they often tied into the zone's themes or mechanics, making each encounter feel unique and tied to the story.
Came across to America, they didn't find hedgehogs, they found lots of rabbits.
When Sonic the Hedgehog 3 launched in 1994, it wasn't just another platformer. It was Sega's flagship title, a game designed to push the boundaries of what the Genesis could do. Praised its stunning visuals, innovative gameplay, and the seamless connection to Sonic and Knuckles. But as impressive as its release was, Sonic 3's true impact wasn't fully realized until years later. One of the game's most enduring legacies is how it solidified Sonic as more than a mascot. He became a cultural icon. By the time Sonic 3 rolled out, Sonic was already in cartoons, comic books, and mountains of merchandise. The game only amplified its popularity, introducing characters like Knuckles and diving deeper into the Sonic's universe and lore. Knuckles, in particular, became a breakout star, earning his place as a mainstay in the franchise and even rivaling Tails in popularity. But beyond its characters, Sonic 3 influenced game design on a broader scale. Its sprawling levels, layered with secrets and alternate routes, set a new standard for platformers. While many games of the era stuck to linear progression, Sonic 3 encouraged players to explore, rewarding curiosity with hidden areas, bonus stages, and power-ups. The introduction of save files, of course, a rarity in 16-bit games, made it easier for players to invest time into fully uncovering the game's depths without worrying about starting over. The game's influence also extended into the world of speedrunning and modding. With its focus on momentum and split-second decisions, Sonic 3 became a favorite for speedrunners. The thrill of mastering every shortcut, loop, and bounce created a dedicated community that continues to push the game to its limits. Meanwhile, modders embraced the game's flexible design, creating hacks and ROM modifications that added new levels, characters, and challenges. In the end, Sonic 3 isn't just a relic of the 16-bit era, it's a testament to Sega's ambition, creativity, and a willingness to take risks.
It's all about fun. It's been going on for 100 years.
Looking back, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 stands as more than just an entry in the Sonic franchise. It's a landmark moment in gaming history. It's a game born from a collision of ambition and constraints, where bold ideas met technical limitations. And yet, somehow, the end result exceeded expectations. For Sega, it was a showcase of their creative and technical prowess at the highest of the 16-bit era. For players, it was a thrilling adventure that pushed the boundaries of what a platformer could be. The game's legacy is cemented not only by its innovations, but by the stories it left behind. From the enigmatic involvement of Michael Jackson in the soundtrack to the groundbreaking lock-on technology that unified two separate releases, Sonic 3 remains a rich subject of discussion and discovery for fans. Its music, its storytelling, and its unforgettable gameplay that have transcended the decades, keeping it relevant even in today's rapidly evolving gaming landscape. Ultimately, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is a testament to the power of imagination in game development. It's a game that dared to dream big, even when the odds weren't in its favor. And because of that, it remains a masterpiece, not just of its time, but for all time. If you enjoyed exploring the history and making of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, click this video here to see more from the Retro Reload. And, as always, thank you for watching.